Welcome back, true crime fans. Today's story is the murder in Marion. Smash that subscribe button if you think you could survive even a single night in a concrete box, because this is the story of a man who spent over 3 decades in one. Before ADX Florence ever opened its gates in '94, the United States already had a problem it didn't know how to solve. His name was Thomas Silverstein. Silverstein entered the federal prison system in the late 1970s for armed robbery, but inside he quickly became something far more dangerous. A leader within the Aryan Brotherhood, a white supremacist prison gang that waged bloody wars against rivals and guards alike. By 1983, Silverstein was serving time at USP Marion, Illinois, a prison that had replaced Alcatraz as the most secure in the federal system. On October 22nd of that year, he committed the act that would seal his fate forever. Using a homemade weapon and the help of another inmate, Silverstein ambushed correctional officer Merle Klutz during a routine escort. Klutz had been on Silverstein's watch list for months, accused of targeting him with strict discipline and harassment. Silverstein struck fast, stabbing Klutz repeatedly until the officer collapsed and died on the cell block floor. For the Bureau of Prisons, it was the ultimate nightmare. A federal officer killed inside the walls of their most secure institution. For Silverstein, it was a declaration of war. He later claimed, chillingly, that it was nothing personal, just survival in a system designed to break him first. The aftermath was immediate. Marion went into permanent lockdown, the first prison in America to adopt a control unit model, where inmates were confined 23 hours a day. And Silverstein was placed under a special order that would follow him until his death. No human contact. He would spend the next 36 years in isolation, moved eventually to ADX Florence, where he became a living ghost, the man in cell 118, seen by almost no one, heard by almost no one, yet known to everyone in the system. And yet, even in that concrete tomb, Silverstein managed to make himself heard, through letters, lawsuits, and a story that challenged America's ideas about punishment, revenge, and survival. But before the Bureau could silence him forever, there was another killing, one that proved Silverstein wasn't the only ghost haunting Marion. No human contact. Life in the box. When the Bureau of Prisons could no longer keep Thomas Silverstein at Marion, they did something unprecedented. They built a cell for him inside another cell, 4 inches of poured concrete on every wall, a solid steel door with a food slot, a shower that ran inside the cell so he would never have to leave, a single small slit of a window facing sky too high to see out of. The paperwork called it administrative segregation. Silverstein called it a concrete tomb. He was allowed 1 hour of recreation a day, in a cage just large enough to pace, and even that was often withheld. Every interaction, even with staff, was through steel and glass. He had no cellmate, no contact visits, no chance meetings in the hallway. For years at a time, his only conversation was the echo of his own voice. He began to mark time by the sounds he could still hear. The rolling of food carts, the clank of doors far down the range, the footsteps of officers changing shift. He wrote later in a letter smuggled out to an attorney, "I have been buried alive," a slow death sentence carried out in small daily pieces. When ADX Florence opened in 1994, designed to house the worst of the worst, Silverstein was transferred to what the Bureau called the most secure cell in the most secure prison in America, Cell 118. 10 feet by 12, concrete everything. Even his recreation cage was indoors, a box within a box under skylights. His world shrank to a television bolted to the wall, a typewriter with the ribbon removed, and whatever books lawyers could convince the prison to let through. The Bureau thought the move would neutralize him. Instead, it turned him into a symbol. Civil rights lawyers began citing the Silverstein conditions in lawsuits, challenging long-term solitary confinement. Journalists called him America's most isolated prisoner. In letters, Silverstein described hallucinations, panic attacks, and a brain that feels like it's vibrating. Even under those conditions, he tried to create a life. He sketched, he wrote, he meditated. He fought in court to be allowed contact with his adult children. He even tried to mentor younger inmates through the walls, sending advice and artwork down the tier to men he would never see. But the Bureau of Prisons was unyielding. No human contact meant exactly what it said. Guards spoke to him only in commands. Psychologists visited through the door. Every motion, every word was documented. When one warden retired, another signed the same order. The years blurred, Presidents came and went, new inmates arrived, terrorists, cartel leaders, spies, and went on to trials or transfers. But Silverstein stayed in his cell, a permanent ghost. In 2007, he wrote, "I have not shaken a hand in 20 years. By then it was 24. He had survived longer in total isolation than any prisoner in modern U.S. history. Yet even as his hair turned white and his health began to fail, the fight over his treatment was not over. A lawsuit filed on his behalf argued that 30 years of total isolation was cruel and unusual punishment, a violation of the Eighth Amendment. The Bureau responded that Silverstein was too dangerous ever to release into general population. A man who had killed a federal officer could never be trusted again." While lawyers argued over his fate, Silverstein began to experience heart problems. He wrote one last letter to a supporter. "I'm not the man I was. I'm older, tired. I just want to see a tree again before I die." But before the courts could decide, another event inside ADX would bring his name back into headlines and raise the question of whether burying a man alive in a concrete box for decades creates safety or simply another kind of violence.